Hey, welcome everyone. I have our time at 3:30 today, and we certainly want to respect your time and start and stop on time. Um, welcome. Today we will be looking at the Lexile and Quantile Hub geared towards secondary teachers of mathematics. My name is Beth Nash, and I am the Test Measurement Specialist for Math and Science here at the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. Before we get down to the details of today, let me share just a couple quick housekeeping items. Everyone is muted due to the size of the webinar. We do have a couple hundred folks scheduled to spend their afternoon with us. We will be recording the webinar, and we will be sending out a copy of the recording along with all of the links and the information that Jane shares in the chat today. That will be sent to anyone who registered via email by tomorrow. And so with that recording, you are welcome to share it with your colleagues, use it for your PLT. If you had to step away, or maybe you would just like to rewatch, you'll have availability to be able to go back and look at that recording whenever you'd like. And then one last note is that DPI is not offering any CEUs for either watching this live today or watching the recording after the fact. We would like to, again, thank you. We partner with Metametrics to provide Lexile and Quantiles for our EOGs and our EOCs. Through this partnership, teachers across the state have free access to a wonderful tool called the Lexile and Quantile Hub. The Hub is a one-stop shop where teachers can find lots of resources to support learning in and out of the classroom. And did I mention that it's totally free? In just a moment, I'm going to turn it over to Matt Copeland to show you how to access the Hub and what resources are included. And as he goes through the presentation, his partner, Jane Scott, will be adding comments and links to the chat that you can click on if you'd like to follow along. If you have any questions, please send them to us in the chat or the Q&A, and Jane will keep an eye on those, and we'll try to circle back and answer as many of those as we can. Matt, thank you for joining us today. Jane, thank you for your time as well. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you guys.
Thank you so much, Beth, for that glorious introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Tuesday. So glad that we're able to share a little bit of time with you today. I know it's been a long, busy day of teaching, and you're really probably hoping you get something productive out of this. We understand how that goes. And Jane and I are going to do our absolute best to keep you focused here and give you some information that we know you're going to be able to use. Just as Beth said, the focus here today is on the Lexile and Quantile Hub, which is kind of our one-stop shop for all of the various quantile tools that help you leverage quantile measures for your students in the classroom, and also encouraging families and communities to utilize these measures at home. So we'll talk a little bit about some of the various tools and give you kind of a quick introduction to what we're doing today. And then also give you time to kind of poke around and kick the tires, play in the sandbox. You can kind of choose your metaphor here, and answer or ask any questions that you may have while Jane and I are on the line to assist you with that. Again, my name is Matt Copeland. I'm the Director of Educator Engagement and Implementation here at Metametrics. I work with all states around the country, helping them to leverage that power of the Lexile and Quantile frameworks in the classroom and at home. And as Beth said, joining me today is my good friend and colleague, Jane Scott. She's our Director of Lexile Learning. She's going to be present there in the chat room, sharing some links that I talk about, answering any questions you have, kind of that back channel conversation, and helping out here with the content. In absentia, I'll introduce the third person you see on this slide, and that is David Barnes. David Barnes is fairly new to Metametrics, joined here about 4 or 5 months ago. And Dave is our Director of Quantile Learning. Under normal circumstances, I would have said, hey, Dave, why don't you do this presentation? But Dave is currently out of the country, celebrating his 25th wedding anniversary. So I suppose we'll give him a little bit of grace and let him do that. Although I would mention where he is, but every time I say the word, I just get more and more jealous. So I'll just skip over that for today. But we would encourage you, and we'll talk a little bit about this later, We host office hours every Monday afternoon and every Friday morning. And I would strongly encourage you all, if you want to talk shop with Dave, Dave's a former high school math and science teacher, feel free to pop into those office hours and spend a little time. Dave can give probably a far deeper explanation of the utility of some of these tools and of quantile measures than perhaps I can. If you haven't figured out, I am not a math teacher by trade. I'm one of those dreaded former high school English teachers, and I know that causes many of you to groan, but I'll make this as bearable as I possibly can. Again, a quick overview of our next 45 minutes or so together today. We'll do a quick review of what are quantile measures, what is the quantile framework, to do a kind of level set for any of those of you that may need that. I know many of you are probably here today, you're well versed in quantile measures. You're probably saying, oh, I don't need that background. I understand. I will keep it short. If any of you are football fans, I call this my 2-minute drill. I try to keep it to under 2 minutes to kind of explain the background. And then as quickly as possible, we'll get everyone directly into the hub itself and actually access the hub. If you've registered before, if you've visited before and registered, that's fantastic. If this is completely new information to you, that's fine as well. We'll help you register, get started, and do all that right here during this webinar. And I'll quickly orientate you to some of the support features that are available in the hub so that when you have questions and you can't get a hold of me or Jane or Dave via email and you don't want to wait for the next instance of office hours, where you can maybe take a quick peek at finding some answers to some of those frequently asked questions. And then we'll talk a little bit about those individual tools in the hub. Again, I'll give you a quick introduction and overview of each tool, and then near the end of this webinar, you all will have some time to poke around on your own and see what questions or concerns you all have with the information that we're sharing. So, okay, let's go ahead and get started and get right in to, again, what I kind of call my 2-minute drill. I am actually going to stop my video. My network is telling me I have an unstable internet connection, so hopefully by turning off my video, this will help a little bit. But we'll dig in and talk a little bit about quantile measures as we get started here. So the quantile framework for mathematics is what the psychometricians refer to as a conjoined scale. And what they mean by that is that this single scale, a yardstick, may help you to kind of visualize this, is used to measure two very different things. As you see on this slide, on one hand, that yardstick is used to measure a student's readiness for math instruction, whether or not that child has the conceptual understanding and whether or not that child has the mathematical skills to engage in certain math problems or math material, math difficulty, however you want to look at that. On the right side of this slide, on the other hand, this very same yardstick is used to measure, again, that difficulty of mathematics materials. Again, whether that's a problem or a worksheet or a lesson from your textbook, or even things like a math video or an online game, we can measure those mathematics materials on the scale as well. And what we're looking for here is this concept of kind of the idealized match. So on this slide, you'll see we have a student with a quantile measure of 840Q. You always know a quantile measure because it's a number followed by a capital Q. And likewise, this child is being paired with a mathematics problem that also measures 840Q on the quantile scale. And I'd ask you to think about that old fairy tale Goldilocks here. When Goldilocks enters the bear's cabin, she sits in 3 chairs. The first one is way too hard, the second one is way too soft, and the third one is just right. The value and the utility of the quantile framework is that it allows us to match students with mathematics materials that are just right for their mathematics abilities. Again, just like Goldilocks, not too hard, not too easy, but right in their wheelhouse for what they are ready to learn. And for those of you that may have been with me yesterday when I talked about the Lexile tools, or those of you that know a little bit about the Lexile framework, there is one key distinction between the Lexile framework and the Quantile framework that I want to point out right here. When we talk about the Lexile framework for reading, we talk a lot about that measure representing what a child can read independently. In other words, that child can sit down with that book and read it for the most part without the help of a teacher, without the help of a parent or another adult guiding them through the process. That's slightly different than what we talk about with that quantile measure of students' readiness. And that readiness is a key word because instead of focusing on independence, as we do on the Lexile side, we focus on readiness for instruction on the quantile side. In other words, when we look at a student's quantile measure, we are assuming that this child at an 840Q, before she sits down and tries to tackle this math problem about finding the volume of this prism, that there is a highly effective mathematics teacher there to introduce and reinforce this process. So again, the Lexile framework focuses on independence, whereas the Quantile framework focuses on instruction. It's a subtle difference, but it's really, really important when we think about how we utilize these measures for our students. So many of you may be asking, well, where do I get these quantile measures? You may be getting them from several different sources. As Beth said earlier, all of your end of course and all of your end of grade assessments there in North Carolina have been linked with the quantile framework. So in addition to the scale score from those statewide assessments at the end of the school year, you're also getting that quantile measure that describes that child's performance on the quantile scale. But at the local level, many of you may be using interim benchmark assessments that also report a quantile measure. And I believe Jane is going to post a link. If you're interested in seeing all of the different assessments that report a quantile measure, Jane's putting a link in the chat room where you can go and see that to see whether or not the products you are using at the local level have also been linked with the quantile framework. And in that way, depending on your locale, your school, your district may actually be receiving multiple quantile measures even within a given school year. And this makes these measures really, really helpful to monitor progress and track our students' growth over time. And tuck that little nugget away. I'll come back to that idea as we dig in to some of these tools. But as I said, this school year, quantiles will be reported on the end of grade assessments in grades 3 through 8. And we are working right now to link the quantile framework to the brand new end of course assessment for Math 1 at the high school level. Additionally, you may also be receiving a quantile measure on your students from the ACT. And again, the framework is the same. The scale is the same. So although you may have a variety of different assessments being utilized, if they report a quantile measure, you have this common scale, this consistent framework to gauge student progress and growth over time. Very quickly, obviously this is a screen grab of the reading page of your end of grade assessment. However, the mathematics page I know looks very, very similar. And down here in the bottom right corner, instead of Lexile information, you would see quantile information on that mathematics page. And so again, your student's quantile score would be reported here alongside the scale score for that end of grade assessment. Just a quick little snapshot of where to be looking to find this information in your individual student reports. So what's the value and utility of these measures? Well, really, like I said earlier, they help us do a number of things. When we know a student's quantile measure, and we know the measure on that same quantile scale of the difficulty of a math lesson or a worksheet or whatever that may be, we can actually gauge a student's success rate, if you will, with that material. In other words, if you have a 10-item worksheet, let's say, and you know the quantile measure of that worksheet, and you know the quantile measure of the student, you can actually forecast how many of those 10 items the child's going to get right, based solely on this conjoined scale that measures both students and materials. But maybe more importantly, in our classroom experience, this also gives us the opportunity to differentiate our instruction. Obviously, in any given mathematics classroom, we see a variety of different abilities among our students. Sometimes that diversity can be an extremely wide range. With the quantile framework and with our calibration of a variety of different mathematics materials that I'm going to be showing you here in a minute, you can actually tailor your instruction to different ability groups or to the different abilities of individual students within your classroom. So this takes the idea of differentiating instruction and makes it not only manageable, but effective for your students in their mathematics classes. Second on this list, again, we can talk about this idea of college and career readiness in a whole new way. Because on the mathematics side in particular, the quantile framework is unique because it's the only scale, it's the only research going on in the country about the mathematic demands of individual careers. And we'll talk a little bit more, and I'll show you some examples of this later. But imagine at the middle school or high school level, you have a student engaged in career exploration, or maybe this is a CTE student who knows their career pathway already. We can actually drill down into the research and to see what level of mathematics individual careers demand of employees. So when that child says, well, I'm going to grow up to be a machinist, we can actually look at the mathematical demands that student will encounter during his or her first year of employment as a machinist. So we can take this rather abstract idea of being college and career ready, and we can make it much more concrete and actually put a number. Well, if you want to be a machinist, you want to get your Lexile, or your quantile measure to 1150Q or whatever the number may be. That's incredibly powerful information, not only as students begin their personal plans of study, but as they encounter that age-old question that as teachers we hear all too often, okay, when am I ever going to use this later in my life? Well, tying it to their career is a powerful, powerful way to answer that question. And finally, quantile measures really do allow us to communicate student achievement more effectively. Again, as I said, regardless of which assessment or which type of assessment is being administered at any moment, if it's linked to the quantile framework, it gives you that common scale, that common framework to interpret those results. So rather than learning 13 different scales over the course of a child's career, you only have to learn one. And that makes our ability to communicate with families and with communities much, much easier. So that was my 2-minute drill. Sorry, I went a little bit long. I had a bird walk or two in there as well. But let's jump straight to the star of the show. And let's go ahead and help everyone access the hub. So if you're better at multitasking than I am, you may actually want to go ahead and launch an internet browser and type in hub.lexile.com. That will take you to the Lexile and Quantile hub. Again, that URL is hub.lexile.com. And I see that Jane has posted that URL in the chat room as well. So if you're comfortable with that multitasking and you can shift back and forth between watching me do something and then doing it yourself, you are certainly more than welcome to do that. If you're more like me and multitasking is a challenge, if you want to just sit back and watch me walk you through this and then explore this a little bit later this evening or later this week or next month, whenever that may be, you can certainly do that as well. So like those old choose your own adventure books, here's an opportunity. You choose your path. You do what's best for you in terms of your professional learning. But at this moment, I'm going to jump live into the Lexile and Quantile hub. So give me just a moment to drag this live screen share over into the window. And Jane or Beth, if you're not seeing the hub, please let me know so I don't drone on endlessly while people can't follow along. But you're seeing a
Matt, you're good. Sorry, you're good.
Thank you, Jane. You're seeing a live shot of the Lexile and Quantile hub. And again, this is where we house all of the various Lexile and Quantile tools so that you can get the most out of these student measures. So the very first thing that we need to do is talk a little bit about registering for the hub. If you've never visited before, the very first thing you're going to want to do is click on this purple button up here in the upper right-hand corner that says register. And folks always ask, geez, why do I have to register an account? And the answers, there are actually two, are pretty simple. Number one, because of North Carolina's Department of Public Instruction's relationship with Metametrics. Metametrics is providing all of these tools and all of their full functionality to every educator in the state of North Carolina completely free. And everything you find within this site is completely free as well. So when you're using the hub to find new mathematics resources, you can rest assured you're not going to hit a paywall. Everything here is completely free for every educator in the state of North Carolina. We need you to register an account so we can provide you with that free access. And the second reason you need to register an account is very simply so you can identify things as favorites. If you think in that kind of social media world. In other words, so you can save them so that when you come back to the hub, next week, next month, next year, whenever that may be, you can find those same materials again quickly and easily. We don't want you to have to reinvent the wheel and research what you're looking for. We want you to be able to find it quickly and easily. So again, if you haven't done so before, click on this purple register button in the top right-hand corner, and you'll notice that we're going to ask you for a couple pieces of very, very basic information. One of the first pieces that you'll enter here is your email address. And please, when you register your account, be sure to use your school email address. That's how we validate that you are indeed an educator in the state of North Carolina. If you use your personal email address, a Gmail account, a Yahoo account, an AOL account, whatever it may be, it's going to throw your registration out and it's not going to give you that free access that you're looking for. So please, when you register your account, be sure to use your school email address. You'll notice that you create a password, you confirm it, and then you identify yourself as a resident of the state of North Carolina. And then second, in terms of importance, be sure that you click this button that says educator. I know many of us are parents as well, maybe even researchers as well. But in order to get that free access, you need to identify yourself as an educator. So when you click on that button, when you fill out the form, you very simply create the account and then check your email inbox because there will be an email from the hub system with a link to finalize your registration and get started. So give me just a moment here. Some of you may want to take this time to fill out those quick fields and register your own account. I'm going to sign in to my account so we can take a look at the hub and explore again some of these individual tools. So what you're looking at now is kind of what we call the main page of the Lexile and Quantile hub. Now, one of the things that I know if David were here, he would complain about because he does this often, is the reality that the Lexile tools are at the top of this page. And you have to scroll down the page to get to the Quantile tools. But I want to show you a quick and easy way to skip over those Lexile tools. Not that they're not important. Those Lexile tools are very valuable for our colleagues teaching reading and other content areas. But we know you all here are here for the Quantile tools. So if you look over here at the navigation bar on the left-hand side, you'll see that there's a heading that says Quantile tools. If you click there, it will take you directly to the segment of that web page where the individual Quantile tools are housed. And in fact, you may notice the gold stars in the upper right-hand corner of each of these tool cards, is what we call them, that describe the tools. Notice that you can actually click on those gold stars and ghost them out. And if you notice over there in that left-hand nav bar, I'll do several of these so you all can see this, as I ghost those out, it actually removes them from the navigation bar. So you have the ability to kind of customize your own homepage, if you will, within the Lexile and Quantile hub. You can prioritize the tools that you find most valuable. Okay, before we dig in to the individual tools themselves, one other thing, again, over here on this left-hand navigation bar that I want to show you is the link at the very, very bottom. And that is the link to our support community. Again, this is a great place if it's late at night or if you've emailed me or Jane or Dave and you haven't gotten a response yet because we're off doing other things, or if it's Tuesday and you don't want to wait till Friday when you have office hours. If you need quick and easy information, that support community can be really, really helpful. So up here, you'll see that there's a search bar. You can certainly type in what you're looking for, but there are also some buckets of information. So for example, if you're having trouble with your account, you might look at some of our frequently asked questions and responses on this bucket, if you will. Or if you need help with a specific Quantile tool, you might click here to dig into those. Or maybe you're looking for some of the research that underpins these various Quantile tools and how they were created and how that research informed that process. That is in the research bucket. Or you may be interested in taking a very deep dive into understanding how to better to implement these Quantile measures in the classroom. We have a link here to our Lexile and Quantile Educator Academy, which is an online asynchronous course that you can sign up for to learn more about utilizing Quantile measures in the classroom. But again, if you have the time, absolutely email me or Jane or Dave, or step into our office hours and ask any questions that you may have. We're always certainly to help you with that. Again, but that support community is that very last link down at the bottom of that left-hand navigation bar when you see that. So with that, I want to jump in and introduce you to some of these individual tools and show you the full power that they have. And again, how you might utilize these, not only to plan your own classroom instruction, but also perhaps to encourage families, to encourage parents to be able to reinforce the learning that you're facilitating in the classroom, to reinforce that learning at home. We're not asking parents and families to become math teachers, but certainly they can help to reinforce the mathematics learning that's already occurred. So to get us started, I'm going to go to probably what I think is our most important quantile tool, and that is the one right in the middle of this collection of quantile tools. It's called the Math Skills Database. And you'll see here, right below the title, Math Skills Database, we kind of identified the audience of each tool. In this case, this is a tool really just for educators. You'll notice other tools may say parents or parents and students or some combination of the three. But the key about the Math Skills Database is that the Math Skills Database is really the crosswalk between your mathematics North Carolina standards for learning at each grade level and what we refer to as our quantile skills and concepts. They have different names. There's different language used with each, but in reality, they are fairly common in what they do. For a moment, imagine that we took the full breadth of mathematics content that a student learns from kindergarten all the way up now through 12th grade. And if we teased out every little element of conceptual understanding, every math skill, every mathematics term that they needed to learn, we could piece those out into discrete statements. It's what we do with our standards documents when we think about what a child needs to learn at each grade level. It's also what we've done with those quantile skills and concepts. And you'll see that abbreviated QSC. And the best way to think of those is just as Metametrics' version of your learning standards. And you may be asking, well, why do we have to use something different? Why can't we just use our North Carolina standards? Well, understand that this same Math Skills Database tool is used by teachers across the country from all 50 states and territories. And so we've done the work of aligning and crosswalking our QSCs to your mathematics standards. So to get started with the Math Skills Database, the very first thing you're going to do is to identify your home state of North Carolina. And then to identify the grade level, or if you're teaching at the high school level, the specific course that you are teaching. And as an example today, I'm just going to pick grade 8 because it's kind of right there in the middle of what we're talking about. Now I can, if I choose to, I can drill down and I can look to see the individual learning standards for 8th grade there in the North Carolina learning standards. But I'm just going to leave that as all goal selected, and I'm going to click search. And the reason that I'm doing that is because it's showing me the complete crosswalk for grade 8 between your North Carolina learning standards and our QSCs. And this really helps me to break down what it is that I'm looking for. So for example, let's imagine I'm teaching a lesson to my 8th grade math class tomorrow, and I'm addressing 8EE1, that standard from the Common Core. That correlates, that aligns with what we call QSC 296. And it deals with using rules of exponents to simplify numeric and algebraic expressions. That language is from our QSC. It may be a little bit different than the language in 8EE1. However, a lot of the basic concepts overlap, and that's why we've identified this as a good parallel structure here in the mathematics learning. So you'll see that QSC 296 has a quantile measure of 1000 Q. So again, if I've got a class roster that lists the quantile student measures for each of my students, I can very quickly go down that roster and see about how many students have a quantile student measure of 1000 or above. I know those students are ready for that lesson tomorrow on EE1. Whereas students who maybe have a quantile measure below 1000 Q may not be. But the real power of the quantile framework is when I drill down in to QSC 296. And so you see that these are hyperlinked. And when I click on them, it takes us to the detail page for that QSC. And it shows us what we refer to first as the knowledge cluster. And the knowledge cluster is the structure of the relationships among those QSCs. In other words, let's imagine that I'm teaching geometry tomorrow, and I'm teaching students how to calculate the area of a circle, okay? So obviously, if we're to the point of the year that we're calculating the area of a circle, I assume my students have already learned about things like circumference, radius, pi. They have the conceptual understanding. They have the abilities to calculate those features. Those are what we consider prerequisite skills to what we're about to learn today. And so you can see here for QSC 296, there are 3 other QSCs that we should understand needed to come before this QSC that we're going to explore today. And you'll notice over here in parentheses, the quantile measure of those various prerequisite skills. So if I'm teaching QSC 296 tomorrow, and I know it has a quantile measure of 1000 Q, I'm looking at that class roster, and I'm looking at the quantile student measures that may be below 1000 Q. And it may be that I have students that are well below that, maybe down here in the 600 Q range. And so what this cues me into is maybe these are some of the skills that maybe I want to touch back on before we begin that lesson tomorrow, maybe even refresh our memories as a class as to what these mean and how they work. It may even be some direct intervention that's needed to shore up those skills before we begin that learning about that lesson. Likewise, our supporting skills are those things that we learn at about the same time that we're learning that focus QSC or that focus skill. So again, if we're studying calculating the areas of circles, then we're also maybe using dimensional analysis to rename quantities or rates. That's something that tends to occur at about the same time. So again, we see another set of QSCs that are related in some way, shape, or form to this focus QSC. And then we see a list of impending skills. And by impending skills, what is this child going to learn at some future date where what we're learning today about calculating the area of a circle is going to become a prerequisite. So for example, we're focused on calculating the area of a circle today, but we know that at some point in the future, we're going to be calculating the area of a cylinder. And of course, you can't calculate the area of a cylinder unless you can calculate the area of that base, of that circle that's present. But what's really great about the quantile framework, once you get down here below this knowledge cluster, this little mini learning progression of mathematics content, is that we have scoured the internet and we've found resources that we have calibrated to this same concept in mathematics. So when I open this little accordion box here for QSC 296, you'll see that we found 19 different resources that deal with this mathematics content. You see that there's a number of virtual nerd videos. There's an online quiz as I scroll down here a little bit more, something from illustrative mathematics, some other additional information. And each of these is a link. And again, as I told you, everything you find linked here is absolutely free. So you can click on these links and you go directly to that resource. So maybe this is a resource that you want to use to help you teach this concept in class tomorrow. Or maybe this is a resource that you want to share with students who you know are going to need a little bit additional practice after they've learned the basics of QSC 296. So again, all of those resources are right there in this QSC detail page. And you'll notice over here at the far right, when I find resources that I like, let's assume for a moment that rags to riches resource we just looked at is one that I like, I can click the blue plus sign and I can change it to a green check mark. That marks that resource as a favorite. And if I ever want to find the resources that I've marked as a favorite, I simply scroll to the top of any of the Quantile tools and I click here where it says Resource Center. The Resource Center is unique to each user because what it is a kind of curated list of everything you've marked as a favorite. And you'll notice I've marked a lot of different things over time as favorites here in the various Quantile tools. But what you can then do is you can identify, let's say, all three of these first three resources are something that I want to share with a student's family. And maybe they're going to use these resources to reinforce the lessons that we learned in math class. What I can do is actually create a list of these sources or these resources. And let's say these resources in particular are for Johnny. And I can say practice on what we learned on Wednesday or whatever it may be. Please excuse my poor typing skills. I can create that list. And you see what it does is it creates a URL. And so I can copy that link. I can drop that into an email. I can share it with students, with colleagues, with most anyone. And what that does, my controls here in the way. I can paste that link into the email. It's not going to let me do it here. But I can send that directly to the student. So they just get a list of not everything under the sun, but just those three resources that I marked. Again, focusing their attention on what you think as their mathematics teacher is most important for them to practice with. So going back to the Math Skills database as well, you'll also notice, in addition to searching by the standard, there is also a keyword search. So if you're just looking for resources about fractions, you could type that in and just see what's available. Of course, it's going to narrow down your results list if you can type in a certain quantile measure. So you're looking for resources about fractions at right around a quantile measure of 600. You can do that. And so it found 6 QSCs that are related to fractions at around that Lexile measure. And again, you can click on these QSCs, you go to that QSC detail page, and again, you open that accordion window, and there are the resources right there curated for you. And that's tied to a specific concept at a specific quantile measure. Or if you know the QSC ID, you can enter that here. So for example, we were looking at QSC 296. And obviously that wasn't about fractions, so it came up with no results. But if you want to see where certain concepts are, you can again search by QSC ID number if that helps you. So again, that is our math skills database tool. Again, it's kind of really, and I'll pardon the math metaphor here, but it really is kind of the common denominator in all of the other Quantile tools that we offer. Because understanding that crosswalk between your learning standards for mathematics in North Carolina and our QSCs is really the important first step. So in this way, you can begin to differentiate your instruction by understanding the relationship between a child's math skills and math abilities and that grade level topic or that grade level standard that you're working to teach. So another way that you can access some really important, valuable information that might help with your instructional planning is our Quantile Find Your Lesson tool. And you're going to notice now that we can zip through these tools much, much more quickly because now you have that understanding of linking your standards or linking your mathematics programs to the Metametrics QSC. That is like the secret decoder ring that allows you to translate not only your standards, but your math textbook or your math program to our QSCs. So the Quantile Find Your Lesson is just that. It is a table of contents for every math textbook or every math program that we've measured. So as an example, I'm gonna use the textbook that I know my children use here at their elementary school in Kansas, the Go Math textbook. And so I have a student in 6th grade. And so I'm going to pull up the Go Math grade 6 textbook just as an example. And what you are seeing here is the table of contents for that textbook. So let's imagine here that tomorrow in class, I'm teaching chapter 4, module 2 of the Go Math textbook. And that is a lesson on dividing fractions. And you'll see here in parentheses, that particular lesson, which we've measured on the quantile scale, has a quantile measure of 870Q. And you'll notice this link that says show QSCs, where I can actually see which Metametrics QSCs are linked or aligned with that particular module in chapter 4 of the textbook. And so again, I can click on these two QSCs. I can see the knowledge cluster. I can open the accordion window to scour through those resources. I can mark them as favorites as I need it. And I can gather great resources that I might use to help me in teaching that lesson, module 2 of chapter 4 of my textbook or my program. So again, it's those QSCs that are really, really important. And using the Math Skills database or using the Find Your Lesson tool to be that secret decoder ring to help you translate from your textbook or your standards or your program into our QSCs to unlock the power of the resources that are there. So we've got time for a couple more Quantile tools, and I'll show you these fairly quickly. The next is that teacher assistant tool. And again, this is a tool that really helps you to begin to differentiate your instruction in the math classroom. So again, you go in, you identify your state, you identify the course or the grade level that you're teaching, and you can even identify a particular standard that you're addressing in a lesson. And what you're able to do here is to see those knowledge clusters with their prerequisite, focus, supporting, and impending QSCs kind of juxtaposed with the range of quantile measures in your classroom. So as we were talking, you likely have a wide range of student abilities in your classroom. And let's say your lowest performing student in class has a quantile measure of 510Q. And your highest performing student has a quantile measure of 1150Q. What the system does is that it begins to identify which of the QSCs that are prerequisite, supporting, and impending fall within that group of children's quantile range. And so you can see here that it looks like overall as a class, the prerequisite QSC should be well taken care of. That should be information well within their quantile range. But what you can do is maybe not think about your entire class, but you could look at smaller groups of students. So maybe we want to take a look at those underperforming students at the bottom of our class that maybe have quantile measures from, let's say, 510Q to 710Q. And what you notice is that several of these QSCs went from being colored green to being colored blue. And in fact, our focus QSC, what we're trying to teach, is actually a blue color now, meaning it's above that group of students' quantile range. So this might be a place where I want to go in and I want to look at those prerequisite QSCs, meet those children where they are, and see what I can reinforce, what I can reteach to help reinforce those skills for this lesson that's going to occur. Likewise, you can think about that group of upper performing students in your class, and you can actually look to see where they may be challenged. Perhaps you want to add some remediation or some enrichment for these students. And so you see here that with those children, maybe you want to take an opportunity to challenge them even more. They're going to grab today's lesson rather quickly. They're going to be able to grasp this and run with it. So maybe you can use those impending QSCs to add a little bit more challenge to what they're learning. Obviously, they're going to learn these impending QSCs at some point in the future, but you may be able to enrich their instruction, keep them focused, keep them learning by tying that future content to what you are learning today. So again, the Quantile Teacher Assistant is really here to help you begin to think about individual students or groups of students and what adjustments we may need to make to our instruction so that those children can be successful. And again, whatever resources you find, you mark as favorites, and then they appear in your Quantile Resource Center so that you can group those and share them with students, with families, with colleagues, with whomever may need them. So going back to our Quantile tools, our main page here for just a moment. One of the other tools that I want to show you here very, very quickly are our Quantile grade level charts. There may be many times when your students, or perhaps you're at a parent-teacher conference and your students' parents are asking, well, you know, how's my 8th grader doing compared to all the other 8th graders in the country? Our grade level charts are a way to do just that. What you see here, over here on the left-hand side, you can identify the grade level you're thinking about. We'll just continue to use 8th grade as our example. You can identify whether this is the beginning of the school year, the middle of the school year, or the end of the school year. And since we're still kind of in the beginning, I'll click on the beginning of the year, the fall time of year. And then you'll notice these sliders where you can begin to identify students at different percentile ranks. So what this chart is telling us is that an 8th grader at the 50th percentile nationally of 8th graders has a quantile measure of about 940Q. And an 8th grader at the 75th percentile has a quantile measure of 1070Q. So if you're interested in that kind of normative information to better understand how is an 8th grader doing kind of nationally against all 8th graders, this gives you some information. And so you can play with these sliders and figure out where that child falls percentile wise against these national norms, if you will. And you can find what best represents an individual child's performance, and you can download it as a PDF if you wanted to print that off and share it with moms and dads, with families, with whomever it may be. And then one last tool I want to share, because I see that we're quickly running out of time here today, is I want to go back to our career demand research. And so I'm going to share with you the career database. And I'm not sure why I keep getting this error message. This is a little strange. I'm wondering if I need to log out and log back in here very quickly. Here we go. Let me do that right quick. I'm going to log back in, zip back down to my Quantile tools, and we're going to take a look at the Quantile. Well, we're not going to take a look at the Quantile career database, but let me just describe this for you instead. So here in the career database, as we talked about earlier, asking a child that age-old question, what do you want to be when you grow up? Here in the career database, you can explore the various career clusters. You can drill down into more than 1,000 different occupations, and you can see what the mathematics demands are of those individual occupations. So the example that I gave you earlier was that of a machinist, and I don't remember the exact quantile measure off the top of my head, but I want to say it was about 1150Q. Don't quote me on that. We'll have to check this later when the tool's working again. But a machinist encounters mathematics at about that 1150Q area. So that gives a student, again, that concrete target that they might be able to shoot for. And folks, I apologize. I'm not sure what's going on with the tools. The engineers at Metametrics must be making some updates or something and had to take the tools down here momentarily. So if you're encountering the same error message, be patient. I'm sure things will be up directly. But again, that's kind of an overview of several of the Quantile tools that are present here. I'm sorry that the tools are not cooperating fully, and I do hope that you all have a chance to kind of explore these tools on your own time. I do want to zip ahead, and since we're running short on time here today, share with you that information that I promised you about our office hours, because as you are poking around, as you are exploring the various tools on the Quantile side, feel free to join us again every Monday afternoon, every Friday midday for our office hours. These are come and go events. You don't need to stay for the entire 2 hours. You can pop in, ask your question, get the information you need, and then pop right back out and get on with your day. So again, every Monday afternoon and every Friday right around lunch, Jane, Dave, and I are available to answer your questions. And of course, if these times are not convenient to your teaching schedule, just shoot us an email. We'll be more than happy to schedule additional time with you as well and find a time that's more convenient to your schedule. But with that, I'm going to throw things back to Beth and ask Jane if there's any lingering questions from the chat room that we need to address.
Matt, the chat room is caught up. Thanks so much for all that great information. And I'll keep reiterating with folks, if questions come along, please don't hesitate to reach out to any and all of us. And thank you, Beth, for giving us the opportunity to share with our friends in North Carolina.
We always love to have you all with us. I do have one item that was sent to me privately just a moment ago. So Matt, I think this one's for you. Is it possible to link or embed resources from the Quantile tools into a learning management system like Schoolology or Canvas?
Yes, that's a great question. And again, if the tools are working, when you follow that link and you see the resource, you see the URL up there at the top of the screen. You can just grab that URL and then you can embed that in any of those learning platforms and share those with students. So for example, if it's an online quiz or an online game that you want to share with a class, you can just grab that URL, share it with the class, and then everything is right there. They don't need to log in. They don't need to do anything. They just click on the link and go just as quickly as you did from the QSC detail page.
Well, that's awesome. That was something I learned new today. I'm not seeing anything else, so I'd like to close us out by saying thank you again to Matt and Jane. The Hub really is a one-stop shop resource that's free because of our partnership with Metametrics. We truly hope that our teachers have been able to enjoy the Hub and that they have found value in this resource. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. We will be sending out a link to the recording, as well as I've captured everything that Jane put in the chat. I'll send all of that out again as well, so you have links that you can just click on. Please feel free to forward that email to other team members who couldn't join us today. And we wish everyone a wonderful afternoon. Bye, guys.
Thank you all. Have a great day.
Bye, Matt. Bye, Jane.